Hey truckers, Tom here. I'm going to tell you about my 2018 trip to Dry Tortugas. So in this episode we're going to focus about the lessons learned from this trip to Dry Tortugas. Since we're living in Florida, Dry Tortugas seems like a great spot to start it off. It's one of the least known parks. It generally gets busy in the wintertime just because of the heat. The wintertime is a little more cooler than the summers, which are just so brutal, being so close to the equator. Dry Tortugas is a small key island off of Key West. For any of you who know about Key West, that's probably 120 miles from Miami, long bridge, and a bunch of key islands that reach all the way out to the southernmost point. And from that island, Key West, it is maybe a 2-hour boat ride from Key West to Dry Tortugas. You can charter a private plane or do a private boat service to get you there, but I'm not sure what those times are at. Now, like I mentioned before, the winter time is definitely the busier time for that park. I booked the trip in June with the intention of going out there in October. Trying to plan a trip around the holidays is almost impossible just because so many people do that ahead of you, maybe a year out. It's pretty crazy on how quickly the shuttle service fills up for that park. So you have to do a little plan ahead with this trip and really look out to 6 months to a year depending on when you want to go. Because again, the winter season is the busy season. Alright, so some of the lessons learned from this trip. I think we definitely overpacked on food. The disclaimer when you're signing up saying bring extra food and water just in case that there's a breakdown or a storm and the ferry service can't get out to get you, which I definitely did, but I definitely packed more than we probably needed. Water we were fine on, and I think we're good for 3 days. We only spent one night there, but I had a bear can filled with a bunch of dried food like nuts, trail mix, all that kind of good stuff. Little lesson learned, I probably could have researched the trip more regarding pack methods. We packed with 2 bags, one being a backpack and the other one being a rucksack. Basically, you're allotted up to a 30-gallon container to put whatever you want in there, up to 100 pounds per person. I was just thinking, hey, we'll just do the ruck, and I think they just ended up putting the ruck in one of the bins they had on the boat. A lot of that stuff they store because it sits on the lower deck on the back of the boat, so when you're ferrying across the water can splash up and get in there. And luckily our stuff was dry. And I think the only one thing that really got wet was the backpack. There's just a little corner of it, probably when they set it down on the deck for taking it off the boat. An item I wish I brought on this trip was sandals. I know that's kind of an easy thing to not forget about, being on a sandy key and it's in Florida, but for some odd reason I completely forgot sandals. I brought tennis shoes, socks, and I figured I'd be barefoot most of the time on the beaches, which I was, but when we're exploring the fort, yeah, walking around barefoot was not fun because there's a lot of brick and jagged kind of floors depending on where you are in the fortress, the moat. There were some very shelly and rocky areas, and it was not kind to my feet, and I wish I brought sandals for such an occasion. But I ended up just getting my sandy feet in the socks and putting those socks on the shoes and then walking around the compound. So I wasn't jacking up my feet. Another little lesson is if you're coming from Tampa, which is where we were coming from, don't try and do it in one shot and then catch the ferry when you get there, because that is a long drive. I think it was an 8-hour drive. We left at around 8 at night in Tampa and got down to Key West, the parking garage, at 6 a.m. or 5, somewhere around there, 5 or 6 a.m. And we had to check into the ferry at 6, hour before the boarding, which is around 7. And I tried sleeping on the ferry out there, which is a 2-hour ride. I got a little nap in, but being that exhausted of driving all night and working the day before, I took a nap at the park after we set up tent, and I kind of missed the sunset, which was a little mad on my part for missing that, but got to see the stars that night and enjoy the sunrise the next morning. Another thing I learned is make sure to check and charge your batteries. One of the things I was really looking forward to is taking my DSLR camera and doing some night photography, especially with the stars out there. I had a shutter remote for my camera, which I forgot to pack batteries for. Luckily, my headlamp had the same battery, so I was able to use that. And mistakenly I forgot to charge the batteries for my camera. So when we got out there, I had about 5 to 7 minutes of actual playing around with night photography. Now this was my first time actually doing night photography, so I was still trying to dial in the settings and get it just right. I didn't get as many photos I wanted to practice around with, but it was gorgeous. This island being 80 miles, I believe, from Key West in the middle of the ocean, there is no light pollution anywhere for miles. So the night sky was magnificent, and we lucked out too with no clouds. So it was a completely open sky, and it was beautiful. I highly recommend it to anyone that wants to check out the night sky over sea. Another thing we learned was probably checking the currents or the wind schedule, not schedule, but the wind direction of the actual location. There was very little maps or kind of details of where the camping sites were, and there's very little shade coverage for the tenting section. There's some like trees and some overhang. Some people will camp underneath those trees, which is great during the day because there's no shade at all, so you get some nice coverage from that. But there's some parts where you're tucked away and there's no wind coming off the water. So where we happened to camp was that very area. We were tucked off, so we got some shade during the day, but at night there was a lack of wind and it just got hot. Luckily, it being hot out, we didn't have to really put the rain fly on, but I did have it ready, and it's a good thing I did, because that very night when we were sleeping, I think around 2 a.m. some rain started falling. So all I had to do was just take the other ends and throw it over the tent. I had it set up halfway, just in the event that rain would come, it's still being Florida. And sure enough, we threw it right up. I know all the other tenters and campers there, they were rushing to pull their rain gear, rain flies out of their packs and all that stuff, but you know, it's best to be a little prepared, especially in a remote location like that. Overall, this trip was a lot of fun. It was great seeing a big piece of history, fort built in the 1800s, and the history behind it. And the very remote location and the naval history with this location is very special, and I'm glad I'm able to see it. I know what's concerning is with the rising tides is and the costs of maintaining a lot of these national parks and historic sites is who knows how long this site's going to be standing or how long it's going to keep going for. It is very awesome to see. I think next time we camp here, we're definitely going to stay a couple more nights. It's very, very beautiful. And try and enjoy the sunset next time and not be exhausted. But overall, I highly recommend it to anyone to see it who hasn't seen it. Again, it's kind of an unknown or not well-known park, but definitely a check if you love blue crystal waters and paradise-looking locations. Alright guys, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you've got any comments, please send them to me. Like and subscribe down below, and thanks again for watching. Until next time.